It's ramblin' time! Star Trek edition! Ha!
Star Trek Strange New Worlds. It's the greatest live-action Star Trek series we've seen since Enterprise was pulled from our TV screens all those years ago. And yet, why am I apprehensive? Why have I feeling a bit of worry? What's going on here? Shouldn't I be over the moon with enthusiasm for such a great show? Well, in this video, I aim to break down a couple reasons that have me slightly worried about this series, but also talk about things that they're doing right and why I feel we may be in good hands after all these years. So, without further ado, I'm going to touch on one of the things that I think is vitally important to why I feel this way, and that's because we've been here before. If you've been watching Star Trek since they came back from their brief hiatus after Enterprise left, although looking back on it, maybe it wasn't so brief, we can see that the 2009 movies changed everything. They're out of continuity, they're fine for their own thing, but everything after that has been based on a new and updated aesthetic. Fine with that, don't have a problem with that. So we start with Star Trek Discovery. I feel like they had a lot of behind-the-scenes issues with trying to figure out what they wanted to be, each season reinventing themselves, even going so far as to replace their creative force. Before the series was even out of the womb, really. They replaced Brian Fuller before it was even turned into a first episode. I think they had a lot of struggles trying to determine what they wanted to do. Each season is changing, differentiating itself from the season before. And as a original Star Trek fan, all the way up through Enterprise, I was ecstatic when I heard Discovery was coming out. I was ecstatic when I thought it was going to be an anthology show. Then when it turned out to be what it was, I had mixed feelings. I actually am one of those people that think the first season may have been the strongest season. Did it feel like Star Trek? No. Was it set in a universe that felt consistent or looked consistent with what came before? No. But I think each leap forward to season 2, to season 3, to season 4, it's even gotten further away. And part of that may be by design to try and distance itself from what it was before. But I think it felt the most like Star Trek in season 1, even though it didn't really feel like that. So that aside, Star Trek Picard has also not felt like Star Trek, and they have tried to trick us, and I don't know if that was intentional or just the story they were trying to tell, but season 1, episode 1 of Picard, full of references, nostalgia, things that felt like original Trek, and then it pulled a hard U-turn. Same with season 2, episode 1 it felt like Star Trek. It looked like Star Trek. It had modern effects. It had modernized characters, but it felt like we were back in the right universe. And then it just fell off a cliff for the next 9 episodes. So you could forgive me for thinking maybe Strange New Worlds is going to follow a similar path. However, we are now 6 episodes in to a 10-episode season, and I would argue of those 6 episodes, they've all been relatively good. Out of them, 5 of them meet one of my high criteria, and that is rewatchability. The only one that's currently on the edge of rewatchability for me is episode 5, Spock Amok. That's the most lighthearted, the most comedic episode. It didn't really hit me in all the right ways. I'm not saying it's a terrible episode. The humor is probably a more subjective thing for you. And heck, in 6 months' time, I might want to rewatch it. But as of right now, the other 5 episodes I could rewatch tomorrow and have no trouble enjoying. And that's one of the key pinnacle factors in Star Trek itself for me, in any show really, but Star Trek Enterprise backwards, every single episode of those shows, be it fantastic or be it horrible, has fallen in my rewatchability scale. Season 1 of TNG, Season 1 of DS9, probably the weakest of those and the ones I've rewatched the least. But even those I have fond memories of. I will rewatch them from time to time, and I will have fun. One of my favorite episodes of TNG is from Season 2, The Royale. I think it's pretty universally hated. I know I love it. I think one other person I know actually likes it. And aside from that, it's not that great. But I love it. I can find a lot of enjoyment in these episodes. Now, if we look to Discovery and we look to Picard, I understand the difference there is serialization, and there's a lot of mystery building over these series, but that's one of the fatal flaws I don't think they intended Well, maybe they did intend it. I don't know. It seems like when you set up these series-long mysteries and you don't have payoffs per episode, you're going to live or die by that season finale on whether or not it's a good payoff. And I don't think they've pulled it off in any of these new series. Season 3 or 4 of Discovery, where it was a big mystery box. Season 2 and even season 1 of Picard didn't pull the landing. That's not the word. Didn't land it well. And I think if that's the case, you're just making a disposable season of television without rewatchability. Strange New Worlds has seemed to fly in the face of that convention, and it seems as if they are attempting to go back to the episodic storytelling. Great. So far, I am enjoying it. But I do think that one of the things that they are falling prey to here is the stories. And that's what I want to touch on next, is so far, Strange New Worlds seems to have kept itself purposely in repurposing stories that we have seen before. 6 episodes deep. Episodes have been great so far, but all 6 of the episodes have been based upon storylines we have either seen before in Star Trek or combinations of 2 or 3 different old Star Trek stories thrown in a blender and turned into something new. I am not saying that is unique to this series. Star Trek has done that since the beginning. They've reused and updated and ported something over from one series to another, just changing the characters, changing it a little bit. That's happened since the beginning. So I am well on board with that. No problem with that at all. The thing that is causing a bit of concern, and I know I will say this again, we're only 6 episodes in, but they need to chart their own course. They need to develop their own identity. So it seems to me that so far, each episode has been kind of going along a list of Star Trek episodes. We've got the, submarine battle episode. We've got the humor episode. We've got the medical mystery episode. They're just going forward with what type of episode, characters that we have seen before. Hopefully, after we've developed what we have developed so far, maybe by the end of the season, they will move forward into their own category and start doing things their own way. And I know there's going to be the people out there right now, well, isn't that what you've been complaining about the whole time? Isn't that what everyone wanted, Star Trek to go back to basics? And I would say yes, with an asterisk, that they also need to move forward. If they're just going to rehash original Star Trek and basically do what we've done before, is there really a need for this show? And that's what it comes down to. Even if it's the greatest, every episode is a 6 out of 10 story, that's not doing anything new or not advancing anything or not adding anything new in and of itself, then why do we need it? So I do have high faith for this. Like I said, I've liked what we've seen so far. They're building the foundations, and I think if they don't fall prey to just a series of regurgitation, if they can take what they've learned and move forward with what they've established in its own direction, we've got a great, great few seasons ahead of us. If they start falling prey to what they've done before, season 2 comes along, it's a galactic ending event, series-long mystery, that's when I'm going to start having problems again. Secondly, along the same lines of story, they're also starting to do something which could be problematic. I choose to look at it as beneficial. Seems to be they're pulling in beta canon. So a lot of this Una Chin Riley stuff that they've been going over, her Allurian background, her genetic engineering, her status as having a name other than Una, or what Una actually means, comes from novels, beta canon, things that were never actually considered a part of alpha canon. And if they're going to pull from works like this, I'm very, very happy, but I'm also a bit hesitant that they're going to rely on this too heavily. So if they can work this in a good way, instead of overly relying on it, I will be very happy, because it seems like they're actually doing their homework. They're trying to integrate this more fully into Star Trek. I also want to touch on characters. So far, 6 episodes deep, most of our characters have gotten development. I would say Ortegas right now has not had an episode of her own. It has been very, very lowly featured in the ones that she is in. Don't know much about her at this point. Hemmer also hasn't had his own episode, but he's had prominent secondary appearances in at least 2 episodes, so we have gotten a bit to know about him. The thing that's a little bit concerning to me is the reliance so far on past or future trauma of our characters. Now, I don't think it's necessary that all of our characters should be fantastic people without trauma. I know trauma can be a wonderful character building device. It just seems like they shouldn't all be introduced this early on. And maybe it has to do with the fact that they're uncertain how long the show is going to run, so they don't want to let things breathe and grow, so we learn about somebody's backstory in season 3. They kind of want to get that all out in the open right off the bat so that they can tell the stories they want to tell. If that's the case, I won't have so much of a problem with it. If they go the route of over-reliance on this trauma, where every story is somebody's background catching up with them, every story is somebody having to overcome a grief or a trauma, that could be very wearing. But it seems like that's not necessarily going to be what happens, and maybe that's because the episodes they've shown so far have not been shown in order from the way they filmed them. But it's been interesting. So we found out Mbenga has that backstory with his daughter. Then the next episode, not touched on at all. Then the next episode, they bring it up again. So if they're not going to rely on this darkness, for lack of a better term, every episode, I have no problem with the trauma. It's just seems like they're introducing a lot of this very, very quickly. And I hope that's just a way to get it out of the way. And it's not an over-reliance on this. Now, rewatchability, characters, stories. So far, we only have 6 to go on. I know I'm harping on this pretty hard for something that we really haven't had much time. If we were going to judge TNG after 6 episodes, I don't know what people would be thinking, but probably not great things. So I do want to make that clear. I am enjoying it. We're only 6 episodes in. I'm just doing this as a, sort of a mid-season 1 kind of analysis as where I'm feeling at the moment. I don't think that was a real sentence, but I'm going to pretend that it was. What else could be concerning? And this is a twofold approach. Canon. Okay. I do enjoy canon. I am sort of a stickler for canon if it's important. If it's vitally, overarchingly important to the entire premise, I find it to be, something we should keep track of. So, like, what am I saying? Something like, let's say they just decide Earth is destroyed by the Klingons next episode. That's obviously canon breaking in a bad way. The canon breaking of the couple episodes ago where the Enterprise under Pike encountered the Gorn, but we never actually saw them, where we know Kirk and Spock in the original series said the Federation or whatever had never encountered the Gorn rather. I'm less inclined to hate that because while technically to the letter of the law it's not matching, it could be construed as matching. And honestly, the Gorn have not been explored that much before, so, I'm willing to let that one bend a little bit. But if they were to do something like destroy Vulcan, destroy Earth, that's overreaching their bounds. Secondary to that, and I'm not entirely sure this isn't the plan, I don't know if this is supposed to be in the same universe. It seems to me that Picard Season 2 made a hell of a lot of alterations to the timeline. Is that a backdoor way of introducing the fact that Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and Picard going forward all take place in a sideline, changed, but not quite the same universe that we grew up with? Meaning things take place, the Federation evolves, ships, people, characters, all the same, but they don't necessarily interact exactly in the same way. This could help explain why there's a Khan descendant. This could help explain, very myriad of reasons of things that don't quite seem to fit the way they did before. If that's the case, I will give them credit for having the balls to do that without just coming out and announcing it. If that's not the case, similar to when Enterprise was on the air, people are going to be constantly thinking it's taking place in a separate universe, constantly complaining about the canon. That's always going to be the case. You're never going to even as much as you try, 100% be able to adhere to canon, because the canon that already exists has some contradictions within of itself. That being said, as long as it's not too egregious, as long as it makes sense to the story and they're not changing the universe outright, I have no problem with a little bending of canon here and there, if it's the small things. If it's the big things, that's going to cause some headaches down the line. And whether or not they want to deal with that, I don't know. So, my final thoughts, Strange New Worlds is doing a great job so far. If we're looking back on it, I would say, and I know this is a hot take, I thought the first 6 episodes of Enterprise were very strong. I know a lot of people hate the first series of Enterprise. I actually really like it. I like what they were trying to do, where, the pilot started off big adventurous thing, and then there's a couple episodes and not much happening, finding a couple planets that were just hunks of rock or, not inhabited. I like that. It's our first foray into real exploration. You're not just going to immediately come across fantastic things. So I personally would still say Enterprise has the strongest of the first couple of episodes, outside of maybe the original series. The original series, I always kind of think of outside because it's its own thing. So when I'm saying classic Star Trek from the TNG era forward, I think the strongest first episode series is Enterprise. Strange New Worlds is probably a strong second so far. I would say none of the first 6 episodes are horrid. Spock Amok, probably the weakest link for me right now. I do think we could be looking at the next great Star Trek series if they don't fall off a cliff. There is precedence for them falling off a cliff based on a couple of the recent series, but I think if we're lucky, we might be looking at the resurgence that we've all been hoping for. So until next time, computer and program.